This is the Resistance Report for day 531. I'm Jon Elmer, and you're listening to the Electronic Intifada podcast. I'm reporting this on March the 20th. These are fast-moving stories, but Ansar Allah in Yemen, who were observing the ceasefire when it went into place on January 19th, more or less immediately, they released the crew of the Israeli ship that they had commandeered. They adhered to the ceasefire terms of the ceasefire, and they had stopped their attacks in the Red Sea when Israel on March the 2nd resumed the blockade on Gaza. Ansar Allah gave a period of time, then gave a warning, and then said they were going to resume blocking ships servicing Israeli ports and Israeli ships transiting through the Red Sea, only Israeli ships. The U.S. responded by opening a war on Yemen last week. On this past weekend, since you last saw us on our last show, the war was opened. If you want to hear some more background on the blockade, I did a whole segment on it on last week's show. And like I said, events are moving quickly. So we now have one show later, we're reporting on the U.S. bombing now 5 straight days onshore in Yemen in response to a threat. It's a response to a threat because according to maritime organizations and trackers, there has not been any attacks on Israeli shipping, but the Americans used this as an opportunity to attack Yemen. And then the Israelis used that as an opportunity to attack Gaza and scrap the ceasefire and destroy it. So the U.S. responded by carrying out attacks onshore, more than 47 bombing raids inside Yemen, again, killing civilians in an attempt to, the United States said, quote, restore freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, something that already existed if there was a ceasefire, which the United States, are the guarantors of. So, a weak position by the Americans, by the Trump administration that has been flouting that they want to be peacemakers. They have blown up the ceasefire, and the main target now is civilians again. And this is a proven failed strategy against Yemen. Yemen has endured 25,000 airstrikes from the Saudi-U.S. coalition that attacked, blockaded, and destroyed their country from 2015 to 2022. And the Ansar Allah movement points to that all the time. They say, we are a blockaded people. We know what a blockade means, and that's why we are blockading Gaza, blockading Israel in solidarity with Gaza, because we know what it's like to be Gaza. And as 𝐓𝐿 𝐄𝐿 said early on, they're fulfilling a legal obligation to intervene in a genocide. And that's what they're doing. So after the U.S. strikes on Yemen, Abdel Malik al-Houthi said on Sunday that the aircraft carrier American warships will become the targets. So they are escalating step by step. The Yemenis said that more than 50 people were killed, including many women and children, as is always the case. And that is the case in this situation now. If we pull up the map, we can take a look at that tomorrow. We can see just what we're talking about. The blockade is, of course, the Bab el-Mandab, which is what Craig was talking about, is at the bottom of that map, the pincer, the choke point there of the Red Sea coming in off the Gulf of Aden. And then you follow the Red Sea up along Saudi Arabia there into the Suez Canal, where shipping is down more than half, or you hang a right in the Red Sea into Eilat, where there's an Israeli port that has been all but shut down, bankrupt, with no incoming car vessels. It's mainly a car shipping port, has been shut down, and there are American warships in that area so-called defending freedom of navigation. If we look at the next slide, you'll see this is the promo that Ansar Allah and the Yemeni armed forces released this week. On screen, it says the decision is being implemented, and in the background, it has Yahya Saree, who's the brigadier general and the spokesperson. You see him there, spokesperson for the Yemeni armed forces, saying the Yemeni armed forces affirm the following: we are resuming the ban on all Israeli ships passing through the Yemeni area of operations, which I just showed you on that map. Abdel Malik al-Houthi said the decision has entered into force. Any ship passing through the declared area of operations will be targeted. This is a practical step and a necessary stance in response to the aggressive escalation by the Israeli enemy against the Palestinian people in Gaza. We assure that this is not the ceiling of our position, but rather the first step, al-Houthi said. Therefore, we will also go in the direction of further escalatory steps, which they have done because the United States began the bombing raids, Israel began its massacres in Gaza, and so the Yemeni armed forces responded with 18 winged missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, anti-ship ballistic missiles, and drones in a joint operation that was carried out by the missile force and the Navy, the naval forces, and they said that that engagement lasted for many hours, and that the American aircraft carrier, the USS Harry Truman, after clashing with our armed forces, fled far north of the Red Sea, a distance 1,300 kilometers away. The Israeli enemy's insistence on preventing the entry of aid to the Gaza Strip is a major aggression and a terrible and horrific crime that cannot be tolerated. Banning Israeli ships from navigation is the first step, but when the Palestinian people's famine in Gaza intensifies, we cannot stand idly by. And indeed, they did, launching ballistic missiles, which I will get to shortly. If we take a look at number 7, you can see the way that they communicate. They communicate. Brigadier General Yahya Sari here. He gives a speech. Anytime there's an action, he comes up, he announces a speech, and he delivers the speech with the details of the action, the reason it was taken, and it's tight speeches that give you all the details. So you see this was the first attack, and he says, in response to this aggression, the armed forces carried out a specific military operation targeting the American aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman and its warships, hit the warships in the flotilla that protect the aircraft carrier in the northern Red Sea with 18 ballistic and cruise missiles and a drone. This operation was jointly carried out by the naval forces. So each time these operations happen, he puts out a statement like this detailing the operation. And these are generally confirmed by the American military, if not right after, generally at some point in the engagement they are. And the U.S. is defending against these missiles and drones that cost about the size of a family car, with anti-aircraft missiles that are interceptor missiles, standard missiles, cruise, ship-launched, ship-borne guided missiles that range in price from $1.5 million to upwards of $20 million in this massively asymmetric battle. If we look at number 7B, the flotilla was spotted on satellite today for the first time. They had their transponders off previously, and what you're seeing is the carrier strike group that includes the USS Truman, USS Stout, USS Dunham, USS Sullivans, and the USS Gettysburg. The Gettysburg is the one I reported on last week in my report that shot down its own plane, taking off from the aircraft carrier. There's also spotting of a nuclear sub that is part of that flotilla that has now been targeted 5 times, one each day since the American operation began. And just to give you a sense, in Task and Purpose is a military publication that had an interview with a retired naval commander who talked about over the 15-month period from October 19th, 2023 to January 19th, when there was a ceasefire, the Navy saw the most intense combat at sea since World War II. It is kind of amazing, he said, the commander said. It's kind of amazing how the Navy has held up with no losses, but the cost has been pretty enormous. You can see those ships there off the coast of Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And he began right away. He describes on October 19th, 2023, the destroyer, the USS 𝐤𝐿, which was with the Eisenhower aircraft carrier, spent 10 hours shooting down 15 Houthi drones, and 4 cruise missiles in the most intense combat engagement by a U.S. military warship since World War II. So that was the first day of the war in the Battle of the Red Sea. It was the most since World War II, and that was for 15 drones. And on Monday, the Ansar Allah and Yemeni armed forces fired 18 drones over several hours. So that gives you a sense from the naval point of view what it's like to be part of those attacks. The Carney would go on to face 51 other engagements. And if we look at the next slide, you can see where the ships are on satellite imagery. This is satellite imagery from Sentinel and compiled by naval tracker MT Anderson. And the war zone pointed out that in January, during the ceasefire, that the U.S. Navy revealed that it had fired 400 munitions since October 2023 as part of their operations in the Red Sea, including 120 Standard 2 SM-2 missiles that are $2.5 million apiece, 80 SM-6s that are $4.5 million, and a combined total of 20 Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles and SM-3s, which can top out at upwards of $30 million pop. And we're talking per unit cost, not deployment costs. So they're spending tens of billions of dollars to protect the genocide that they underwrote the ceasefire to as guarantors. So remarkable developments by the Americans. They're clearly escalating this battle. If we look at the next slide, Trump said that the Ansar Allah movement was not popular. One day after the bombing missions by the Americans, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the leader of Ansar Allah, told his people to come out for a demonstration the next day. Look at the size of this demonstration that was called one day before. And people who have been following this conflict know that these demonstrations take place every Friday. They're called the Million Man Marches. They sure look like a million. They're definitely many hundreds of thousands. And this position that Ansar Allah is taking is very popular locally. The support for Palestine is very popular. Look at the size of that demonstration. And they have been doing these over and over and over again. So they're not going to they're not going to surrender like Trump said. Trump said that the war will go on until Ansar Allah surrenders, and they're not going to. And if we look at after this one, the next one, you can see the weapons promo that they put out after that, which talks, the Pentagon talked this week about how there had been 170 separate attacks by Ansar Allah and the Yemeni armed forces against U.S. Navy shipping or U.S. Navy warships since 2023. And you can see there the Palestine 2 ballistic missile being launched. There you see the drones that they launch. That's the Jaffa drone that hit Tel Aviv. They just showed that. Those are the 2 tankers. They've only sunk 2 tankers. They give warnings and threats and tell people to turn around. They fire warning shots. 4 sailors have died, 3 on a ship, and 1 Navy SEAL fell into the water on the deployment. Doesn't really count to me as a casualty of this operation. And if we look at the next slide, you can see that Ansar Allah promised to escalate, and Israel escalated, and this is what Ansar Allah got. They got Palestine 2 ballistic missiles fired at Israel. This is at the Nevatim Air Base in southern Israel. And if we look at the next slide, this was today, just now, as Abu Obaida was talking about, how their missiles in the sky overlapped with Qassam's rockets from Gaza. The Yemeni armed forces today said, in support of the oppressed Palestinian people and in response to the massacres committed by the criminal Zionist enemy against our brothers and sisters in the Gaza Strip, the missile force of the Yemeni armed forces carried out a qualitative military operation targeting Ben Gurion Airport. As you can see, that's the Israeli military. If you're listening at home, we're showing a red alert sirens from the Israeli Defense Forces that are all over central Israel and the heartland. More than 2 million people fled to the shelters. The Yemeni armed forces said that they were attacked with a Jaffa drone, were attacked with they attacked Jaffa with a Palestine 2 ballistic missile that you saw being launched there. And this is the 5th consecutive day of these attacks. In response, the armed forces, in response to what the Israelis have carried out in Gaza that we've been reporting on this show. The Knesset emptied from those missile launches, ran for shelters, and the Israeli Red Crescent, or the Star Magen David Odom, reported 13 trip and falls and several other anxiety incidents from those from that ballistic missile fire that the Israelis say was intercepted. We saw pieces of shrapnel in interior of Israel. So that is the Yemeni front, and reporting on Gaza for the resistance report for this week. It seems that we are going to be back with this reporting now at the war, now that the war seems to be on again from all that we have seen.